5 girls, 5 gyms, 5 times a coach said, "She's fine, she'll do it," while the doctors, the parents, and the girls themselves were saying the opposite. Some lived, one did not, and every single one of their bodies paid the price for someone else's gold medal dream. So why does this keep happening over and over in the same sport? The bar release was nothing new. Melanie Coleman had done it 100 times. November 8th, 2019, Southern Connecticut State University. She was 20 years old, a senior, studying to be a nurse. She let go of the high bar to catch the low bar. Her hands missed. She landed on her neck. 2 days later, she died at Yale New Haven Hospital. Reporting from the New York Times and the Hartford Courant followed in the days after. Her teammates were in the gym. They saw her fall. They saw her coaches run. The ambulance came. The hospital tried. The damage to her spinal cord was too much. The investigation that came next did not blame the bar. It did not blame the mat. It blamed something quieter. College gymnastics at the Division II level had less spotting than elite, less medical staff in the gym, fewer people standing by during release skills. And Melanie, earlier that season, had asked for more support during her releases. The answer she got was that she was experienced. She could do it. Experience does not catch you when your hand slips. After her death, the NCAA forced lower division programs to look at their spotting rules. Her family started a foundation in her name. Her teammates kept her number on their leotards. The pride that killed Melanie was the pride of a system that decided college gymnastics was safer than elite. It was not. She had asked for help. She did not get it. She was 20. And Melanie's story is only the beginning. The next 4 girls in this video were every bit as talented, every bit as protected on paper, and every bit as alone when it mattered. Before we get to the moment that changed everything for them, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. Because what comes next is the part the cameras almost didn't catch. She was on the cover of Sports Illustrated at 15. They called her the next Mary Lou Retton. She was supposed to be the face of the 1988 U.S. Olympic team. She did not even make it. Christy Phillips was a child from Baton Rouge. She trained in Houston at the gym run by Bella and Marta Karolyi. She was tiny. By the photographs, she was the size of an average 10-year-old. And her coaches, by her own account given to the Daily Mail in 2008 and in years of interviews after, told her she was fat. Reporting by Joan Ryan in Little Girls in Pretty Boxes documented what happened next. Christy was put on diet pills. She used laxatives. She used diuretics. Her body, at the age it was supposed to be growing, was being shrunk. She was weighed in front of her teammates. She was shamed in front of her teammates. She was a child, being told by adults that she ate too much when she was barely eating at all. Christy did not die. She survived. But she did not make the Olympic team, and her career ended badly. And she spent years rebuilding her relationship with the sport. In the lawsuits and reporting that came out around the Larry Nassar case decades later, Christy was one of the voices who reminded America that the smiling girls on the podium had not been fine. They had been managed. The pride was a coach's brand. The pride was a federation's medal count. The pride was a country's hunger for tiny prodigies. Christy carried that pride inside her shrinking body for years. She is alive to talk about it. Many of her teammates are alive too, and many of them are still telling the same story. The system heard them only when it had no choice. Shang Chunsung was born on March 18th, 1996, in a poor village in Zhangjiajie, Hunan Province, in southern China. She grew up in a very poor family, and she was malnourished as a child. Both of her parents were construction workers in Changsha. She had a brother who has a visual impairment, and her biggest hope was to earn enough money to cure her brother's eyesight. That is where her story starts. Not in a gym, in a village so poor, her family could not afford to fix her brother's eyes, when his vision could still have been saved. She found gymnastics at 6. By her own first coach's account, she had no natural talent for the sport. Her knees protruded, her toes wouldn't straighten, and stretching brought her to tears. Quitting never crossed her mind. If I gave up, I'd spend my whole life in that small village. I wanted to change my fate and help my family, she said. She made the Chinese national team in 2010. By 2013, at the World Championships, she had a skill named after her on the uneven bars, a piked tkachev that the code of points still calls the shang. She was a tiny gymnast, by then a teenager, performing one of the hardest release skills in the sport. In 2016, at the Rio Olympics, she was 20 years old and the captain of the Chinese team. She arrived in Brazil with a fever. She held it together for the team final. She led her teammates to a bronze medal in the women's team event, despite suffering from a cold and fever that held her out of training for 5 days. Then, she finished 4th in the all-around. She placed 4th in the individual all-around competition with a score of 58.549, just 0.116 behind bronze medalist Alia Mustafina. Just over 1/10 of a point. That is what stood between Shang Chunsung and an individual Olympic medal that would have changed her family's life forever. She cried after the all-around. The reporting from the Rio Games described why. As a girl from a remote village in South China's Hunan province, a medal could have provided her family a better life. Both of Shang's parents are carpenters who can barely afford their lives. Her own coach told reporters she barely owned new clothes. She wears her uniform every day, even outside of the gym. She only purchases new clothes for special occasions, upon the coach's request. Her mother said she saved every penny she earned for the family. Shang retired in 2017 due to injuries. She came back briefly, she retired again. She bought her brother a house with the money she had earned in the sport. She enrolled at Central China Normal University. She discovered parkour, and then she did something almost no one saw coming. In 2024, she won the Parkour World Championships, and in 2025, she won gold at the World Games in Chengdu, completing a parkour Grand Slam, the first ever for China. She is alive. She is thriving. She bought her brother the house she had promised him when she was 10 years old. The cost she paid was not the cost the other girls in this video paid. It was the cost of a child carrying her whole family on her back from the age of 6. The pride was not hers. The pride belonged to a country that loved her medals. The love belonged to a brother she fought every day of her childhood to take care of. The femur is the strongest bone in the human body. It is the long bone in your thigh, the one that holds up your whole frame, the one that takes a car crash or a fall from a roof to break. Jennifer C. broke hers cleanly in a fall from the uneven bars, and a few months later, she came back from that injury to win the 1986 U.S. National Championship. She was a teenager. She was supposed to be in 10th grade. Instead, she was 300 miles from her family, training 6 days a week, 8 hours a day, in a gym in Allentown, Pennsylvania. The gym was called the Parkett's National Gymnastic Training Center. It was run by a husband and wife coaching team, Bill and Donna Strauss, who were known in the sport for producing winners by any means necessary. Jennifer had left her home in New Jersey at 15 to train there. She boarded alone in an unheated room in exchange for a chance to become a champion. She was a child who had left home to be coached by adults who, in her own published account, did not protect her. In 2008, 22 years after she won that national title, Jennifer Say published a memoir called Chalked Up. The book was reviewed in the New York Times and The Observer. She did interviews with NPR, with Salon, with newspapers across the country, and what she described was not the version of elite gymnastics that Americans saw on television every 4 years. She described 8-hour training days. She described those training days happening while she was still recovering from broken bones. She described the diet she was on in the last years of her career, a fruit and laxative diet, while she was working out for 8 hours a day on barely healed broken bones. She described being weighed in front of her teammates. She described the constant pressure to be smaller, to look younger, to outrun the menace of her own body growing. She wrote about other gymnasts in the gym too, coaches she had watched, things she had seen done to other children. A coach who hurled a folding chair at a girl who could not perform a difficult maneuver on the uneven bars. A coach who used the gym's loudspeaker to humiliate a 10-year-old for gaining a single pound. These were not stories from another era she had read about. These were things she had seen with her own eyes in the gym she lived next to, under the coaches she had been sent to. In her interviews, she was clear about who was responsible. The coaches were the adults, the parents trusted the coaches, the federation trusted the coaches, the judges trusted the coaches. Everyone above the children trusted everyone else above the children, and the children themselves were the only ones who could see what was actually happening. And they had been trained, literally, professionally, every day for years, to keep their mouths shut and to keep performing. Jennifer kept performing. The femur she had cleanly broken was the strongest bone in her body, and she rebuilt herself on top of it. And she stood on a podium in 1986 with a national title that she had paid for with everything she had. She did not make the 1988 Olympic team. The injuries piled up. The eating disorder got worse. By the time her career ended, she was burned out, broken down, and barely eating. She did not die. That is the part of her story that matters, and that almost gets missed when the dead are the ones who get the headlines. Jennifer survived. She left the sport. She went to Stanford. She graduated. She built a career outside gymnastics. She got married, had children, became a senior executive at Levi Strauss & Company. She became brand president. She rejected a $1 million severance package on her way out the door because she wanted, by her own statement, to be free to tell her story without strings attached, and she told it. In 2020, Jennifer Say produced a documentary called Athlete A for Netflix. The film followed the Indianapolis Star reporters who broke the Larry Nassar story, and the gymnasts who had finally been heard after decades of being ignored. The documentary won an Emmy. It connected the dots between the abuse Nassar had committed and the larger system, the coaches, the federation, the culture that had created the conditions for that abuse to go on for as long as it did. In other words, the gymnast who had broken her own femur in 1985 and competed through it became, decades later, the producer of the film that helped Americans understand why their gold medals had been won on broken children. The straight line from her own training room to the Karolyi Ranch to the federal courthouse where Nassar was sentenced, Jennifer Say was one of the people who drew that line in public. The pride that broke Jennifer's femur and starved her body was not hers. It belonged to a gym in Allentown that needed champions to keep its name on the map. It belonged to a federation that needed medals to keep its funding. It belonged to a country that wanted to watch 16-year-old girls fly through the air and did not want to know what those girls were eating or weighing or being told or having thrown at them when the cameras were not on. Jennifer survived to write the book about it. She survived to make the film about it. She survived to become a voice that other gymnasts could point to and say her. Listen to her. She was there. She knows. Many of her teammates are still trying to find the words she found. Some of them never will. The strongest bone in the human body broke. The girl it belonged to did not. And the sport that broke her is still, 3 decades later, being forced, slowly, reluctantly, court ruling by court ruling, to listen to what she has been saying since 1986. She was 14 years old. Her name was on lunchboxes. Her face was on cereal boxes. And on the night of the team finals at the 1996 Atlanta Olympics, Dominique Moceanu walked out onto the floor with a stress fracture in her right tibia, a leg wrapped in tape, and a smile that the cameras loved. The smile was the part the country saw. The bone was the part nobody talked about. Dominique was the youngest member of the Magnificent Seven. She was the youngest gymnast ever to win the senior all-around title at the U.S. Championships, a record she had set at 13. She was coached by Bela and Marta Karolyi, the same coaches who had trained Nadia Comaneci, the same coaches whose names appear over and over again in the stories of girls who got hurt under their watch. By the summer of the Atlanta Games, she had been diagnosed with a stress fracture in her right tibia after the 1996 U.S. Championships, where she had placed third. The injury was bad enough that she had to sit out the Olympic trials entirely. She did not jump, she did not vault, she did not tumble, she watched, but the Atlanta Games were 3 weeks away. Dominique was a draw, Dominique was a face. She was petitioned onto the team on the strength of her U.S. Championship scores, and the bone in her right shin, the one that was already cracking, was sent to the Olympics with her. In Atlanta, she competed with her leg heavily bandaged. She was 14 years old. Her coaches knew, her doctors knew, the federation knew, the cameras knew, because you can see the bandage in the broadcast footage if you watch the tapes today. And every day, in front of millions of people, she trained and competed on a leg that medicine said should have been resting in a brace. Then came the fall. During the Atlanta Games, Dominique fell on the balance beam and hit her head. She has spoken about it publicly, on Twitter in 2021, and in interviews afterward. I was 14 years old with a tibial stress fracture, left alone with no cervical spine exam after this fall, she wrote. I competed in the Olympic floor final minutes later. Read that again. A 14-year-old child competing with a known stress fracture in her shin fell and hit her head. No one checked her neck. No one ruled out a cervical spine injury. No one held her out of the next event. Minutes later, she was on the floor, tumbling, twisting, landing on the same broken leg. The floor exercise, the balance beam, the vault. She did all of it on a leg that was supposed to be in a cast. The team won gold. America cheered. Carrie Strug landed her vault on a torn ankle in the rotation right after Dominique faltered, and that image, Bela Karolyi carrying Strug to the podium, became the defining moment of the 1996 Games. Dominique's broken leg was a footnote. A 14-year-old smile on national television, with her shin held together by tape, was treated as inspiration. The pride was not hers. Years later, when Dominique sat down to write her 2012 memoir, Off Balance, the picture got worse. She described a training culture under the Karolyis that she said had been abusive, verbally, emotionally, and in the way her body had been managed. She described being weighed. She described being shamed. She described a federation that knew what was happening and chose the medals. In 2008, she had already done something almost no Olympic gold medalist ever does. She had written a letter to USA Gymnastics, 8 years before most of the country had ever heard the name Larry Nassar, describing the abusive culture inside the program that had produced her gold medal. The letter, by her own account and by reporting that came out years later, was largely ignored at the time. USA Gymnastics did not act on it. The Karolyi Ranch did not close. The system kept producing champions and kept hiding the cost. Then, in 2016, the Indianapolis Star broke the Larry Nassar story. The dam broke. Lawsuits were filed. The Karolyi Ranch was eventually shut down. USA Gymnastics filed for bankruptcy. And Dominique's 2008 letter, the one that had been ignored, became part of the public record of how long the Federation had known and how long it had refused to listen. Dominique is alive. She is 44 years old now. She runs a gym with her family. She raises her own daughters. She is one of the most public voices in American gymnastics, asking parents and coaches to look honestly at what these medals cost. When Simone Biles withdrew from events at the Tokyo Olympics in 2021 to protect her own mental and physical health, Dominique came forward to support her, saying Biles' decision demonstrates that we have a say in our own health, a say I never felt I had as an Olympian. That is the line. That is the whole story in one sentence. A 14-year-old girl, broken leg taped up, head untreated after a fall, smiling for the cameras because the adults around her told her to, and 25 years later, finally saying out loud that she had never been allowed to say no. The pride that fractured her tibia and sent her onto the floor anyway belonged to 2 coaches and 1 federation. The price was paid by a child. She survived to tell the story. Many of her teammates are still telling it. And every rule that exists today about medical clearance, about minimum age, about who is allowed to be in the gym with a young gymnast, exists because girls like Dominique Moceanu were hurt first and listened to second. 5 girls, 1 died. 2 were paralyzed by the sport in ways that did not show on the scoreboard, but never left their lives. 2 won medals and spent the rest of their lives explaining what those medals actually cost. The pattern is not arrogance. The pattern is adults, coaches, federations, doctors who looked the other way, deciding that a child's body was an acceptable price for a podium. The investigations have been written. The memoirs have been published. The lawsuits have been filed and won. Larry Nassar is in prison for the rest of his life. The Karolyi Ranch is closed. USA Gymnastics filed for bankruptcy and was forced to pay survivors. The rules around release skills, around spotting, around medical clearance, around weighing children, every one of those rules exists because girls like these were hurt first. If their names mean anything, they mean this. The next time a coach tells a child she is fine when she is saying she is not, somebody in the room has to be the adult who listens. That is the lesson. That is the only lesson. And it should not have taken 5 girls, or 50, or 500 to teach it.